Book of Heaven, Volume 23, Part 4. October 20th, 1927. How created powers can neither embrace nor exhaust the uncreated power. Not even the Virgin, or the very humanity of our Lord. How the divine will possesses the incessant and ever new act, and has the virtue of doing ever new things. Example: how it awaits its kingdom in order to communicate this new act as the fulfillment of its glory. I continue what is written above. So I thought to myself, my beloved Jesus says that only when his divine will is known on earth, and its kingdom is formed, and the children of this kingdom take their place in the celestial fatherland, a place reserved only for them, then will his glory on the part of creation, and the glory of all the blessed, be complete. And I thought, in heaven there is the sovereign queen who had all the fullness of the life of the divine will, such that no one, I believe, will be able to reach her. Why then is the glory of God on the part of creation not complete? And many other doubts and thoughts came to me that it is not necessary to put on paper. I will only say what Jesus told me. My daughter, you are too little, and you measure with your littleness the endless greatness and my unreachable wisdom. As holy as the creature might be, as was my beloved mother, even though she possesses all the fullness and totality of all the goods of her Creator, and the kingdom of my divine will had its full dominion in her, in spite of this, she could not exhaust all the immensity of the goods of the divine being. She filled herself to the brim. She overflowed outside to the extent of forming seas around herself. But to restrict within herself, to embrace all that the Supreme Being contains, this was impossible for her. Not even my humanity could enclose by itself alone all the immensity of the creative light. I was not completely filled with it, inside and out. But oh, how much of it remained outside of me, as the circle of my humanity did not have an equivalent magnitude in which to enclose a light so endless. The reason for this is that created powers, of whatever kind they might be, cannot exhaust the uncreated power, nor embrace it and restrict it within themselves. The height of the Queen of Heaven, and even my very humanity, found herself with her Creator in the same conditions as you may find yourself in, if you expose yourself to the rays of the sun. You may find yourself under the empire of its light, be invested by it, feel all the intensity of its heat, but being able to restrict within and upon yourself all of its light and heat, this will be impossible for you. However, in spite of this, you cannot say that the life of the light of the sun and of its heat is not in you and outside of you. Now you must know that our divine being, our creative will, possesses its incessant and ever-new motion, new in the joys, in the happiness, new in the beauty, new in the crafting that our wisdom puts out in the formation of souls, new in the sanctity it impresses, new in the love it infuses. Therefore, because it possesses this continuous new act, it has the virtue of doing ever new things. And if the Queen Mamma was made all beautiful, pure, and holy, this does not exclude that we can do more new and beautiful things worthy of our works. More so, since in creation, as our divine Fiat came out into the field in creating all things, it also put out into the field all the new acts with which it was to form the creatures, the rarities of beauty it was to communicate, and the sanctity it was to impress in those who would live in our divine will. And since our will did not have life in the creatures, nor did it have its kingdom, it only had it in the sovereign Queen of Heaven, and so it made the first prodigy and miracle that astonished heaven and earth. It awaits the other creatures, who are to possess its life and form more of its kingdoms in which to reign, so that we may form, with our new act, more rarities of sanctity, of beauty, and of grace. Oh, how my divine will anxiously awaits this, its field of action, to issue these new acts. My will is like an artisan who knows how to make hundreds and thousands of statues, one different from the other. He knows how to impress in them such finesse and rarity of beauty, of postures, of shapes, though none of them can be said to be like any of the others. He does not know how to do repetitions, but always new and beautiful statues. However, it is not given to him to put out all of his art. What sorrow would his inactivity be for such an artisan? Such is my divine will, and this is why it awaits its kingdom in the midst of creatures, so as to form rarities of divine beauty in them, never before seen, sanctities unheard of, novelties never before touched. It is not enough for its power that can do anything, for its immensity that embraces everything, for its love that is never exhausted, to have formed, with its divine arts, the great lady, the Queen of heaven and earth. But it wants her retinue, in which my Fiat wants to live and reign alone, in order to form more works worthy of itself. How then can our glory on the part of creation, and the glory and happiness of the human family be complete, if our work is not fulfilled in creation? The most beautiful statues, the most important works, are still to be made. The purpose for which creation was created is not realized nor fulfilled, and it is enough for a work to be lacking one point, one tiny little flower, one leaf, one shade, that it cannot have all its value, nor can the one who formed that work earn complete glory. More so, since in the work of our creation, it is not just one point that is lacking, but the most important things are varied divine images of beauties, of sanctity, of perfect likeness to ourselves. And just as our will began the work of creation with such great sumptuousness of beauties, of order, of harmony, of magnificence, both in forming the machine of the whole universe and in creating man, so it is right for the decorum, glory, and honor of our work, that it be fulfilled with yet greater sumptuousness and diversity of rare beauties, all worthy of the incessant and new act that my divine will possesses. Those who will live in its kingdom will be under the power of a new act, of an irresistible and continuous force, such that they will feel invested with a new act of sanctity, of dazzling beauty, of most refulgent light. And while they possess this act, a new one will arrive, and then one more, without ever ceasing. Amazed, they themselves will say, "How holy, beautiful, rich, strong, happy is our Fiat thrice holy that is never exhausted. It always has sanctity to give us, beauties with which to embellish us evermore, new strengths to make us stronger, and new happinesses, such that the first is not similar to the second, or to the third, or to any of the others it will give us." These fortunate creatures will be the true triumph of the divine Fiat, the most beautiful ornament of all creation, the most refulgent suns, that will cover with their light the void of those who have not lived in its kingdom. Now, my inseparable mamma, who possesses this new and continuous act as her own life, that was communicated to her by my divine will, because she lived life in it, is the first, most refulgent sun that my volition formed in her, and she occupies the first place of queen, and gladdens the whole celestial court, making her light, her joys, her beauty be reflected in all the blessed. But she knows that she did not exhaust all the new and incessant acts that my divine will has established to give to creatures, because it is inexhaustible, and oh, how many more it has! And she awaits that more suns be formed from this, its new act of new beauties and of rare beauty. And as true mother, she wants to be surrounded by all these suns, that they may reflect themselves in one another and delight one another, and the whole celestial court may receive not only her own reflections, but those of all these suns, as the fulfillment, for all, of the glory of the work of the creation of her Creator. As queen, she awaits with great love the properties of my will in the creatures, that are as though her own, for she was the first to form the kingdom of my divine will within herself. Suppose that, instead of one sun, more suns were formed in the vault of the heavens, new in beauty and in light. Would the vault of the heavens not appear as more beautiful and more adorned? It certainly would. And would these suns not reflect themselves as light in one another? And would all the inhabitants of the earth not receive the reflections, the goods, of all these suns? So it will be in heaven. More so, since those who have possessed the kingdom of the supreme Fiat on earth will have endless goods in common, because one is the will that has dominated them. This is why, even though in heaven there is the sovereign Empress who possesses the fullness of the life of my divine volition, our glory on the part of creation is not complete. First, because our will is not known among creatures, and therefore it is neither loved nor longed for. Second, because not being known, it cannot give what it has established to give, and therefore it cannot form the many rarities of works that it knows how to do and can do. While once a work is complete, one sings victory and glory. October 23rd, 1927. The Little Girl. How the Divine Will is Kingdom of Life. Necessity of the knowledges about it. How heaven and earth are there reverently listening to the knowledges of the divine Fiat. Love and tenderness of God in creating man. I felt my poor mind sunken inside the divine Fiat, and while counting my acts in it, I saw a little girl before me, all timid and pale, as if she was afraid of walking within the immensity of the light of the divine volition. And my adored Jesus came out from within my interior, and filling his holy hands with light, he placed that light in the mouth of the little girl, wanting to drown her with light. Then he took more light and placed it in the eyes, in the ears, in the heart, in the hands and feet of that tiny little one. And she remained invested by the light. She blushed all over, and remained as though enmeshed and overwhelmed within that light. Jesus amused himself in drowning her with light, and delighted in seeing her hampered within it. And turning to me, he told me, "My little daughter, this little girl is the image of your soul, timid in receiving the light and the knowledges of my divine will. But I will drown you with so much light that you may lose what remains of the timidity of the human will, because in mine there are not these weaknesses, but divine courage and strength, insurmountable and invincible. In order to form the kingdom of my Fiat in the soul, I lay all the knowledges about it within her as the foundation, and then I take possession, laying my very life within her, in order to have my true kingdom. See, how great is the difference between the kingdom of the kings of the earth and my kingdom. Kings do not place their own lives at the disposal of each individual, nor do they enclose it in them, nor do they enclose the life of the peoples within themselves, and therefore their reigning is subject to ending, because it is not life that runs between one and the other, but laws and imposition. And where there is no life, there is no love, nor true reigning. On the other hand, the kingdom of my divine will is kingdom of life, the life of the Creator enclosed in the creature, and that of the creature transfused and identified with the Creator. Therefore, the kingdom of my divine will is of unreachable height and nobility. The soul is constituted queen. And do you know what she is made queen of? Queen of sanctity, queen of love, queen of beauty, of light, of goodness, of grace. In sum, queen of the divine life, and of all its qualities. What a noble kingdom, and full of life, is this kingdom of my will! Now see, then, the great necessities of the knowledges about it. They are not only the fundamental part, but the nourishment, the regime, the order, the laws, the beautiful music, the joys, the happiness of my kingdom. Each knowledge possesses a distinct happiness. They are like many divine keys that will form the beautiful harmony in it. This is why I am abounding so much in telling you so many knowledges about my divine fiat, and I require of you greatest attention in manifesting them, because they are the base, and are like a formidable army, that will keep the defense, and will act as sentries, so that my kingdom may be the most beautiful, the holiest one, and the perfect echo of my celestial fatherland. Then Jesus kept silent, and then he added, My daughter, when my divine will wants to issue one of its knowledges or one new act, heaven and earth honor it and listen to it reverently. All creation feels a new divine act flowing within them, that like vital humor embellishes them and renders them twice as happy. They feel as though honored by their very Creator, who with his omnipotent fiat communicates to them new knowledges about it, and they await the attitude of that knowledge in the creature, to see the new act of the divine volition repeated in the creature, to have the confirmation of that good, as well as the joy and the happiness that the new knowledge brings. My will then takes the attitude of feast, because it issues from itself a divine life, that while being directed to one creature, spreads and communicates itself to all creatures. After this, I was continuing my round in the divine will, bringing myself into Eden, so as to be present when the divine majesty, having formed the beautiful statue of man, was giving life to it, breathing over it with its omnipotent breath, so that I might glorify my Creator in an act so solemn, and love him, adore him, and thank him for a love so excessive and overflowing toward man. And my divine Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, this act of forming and infusing life in man with our omnipotent breath was so tender, touching, and of such great joy for us, that the whole of our divine being overflowed so much with love as to enrapture our divine qualities with an enrapturing strength, so as to infuse them in man. In breathing over him, we poured everything into him, and in blowing into him, we placed our Supreme Being in communication with him, in such a way as to render him inseparable from us. This act of ours never ceased, because if in the creation of the whole universe it was our will that constituted itself life of everything, in man we gave not only our fiat, but together with our breath, we gave our very life to him. And this breath of ours has not yet ceased, so as to continue the generation of other creatures, to render them inseparable from us. When we do a work, our love is so great that after it is done once, the attitude remains of doing it always. Therefore the ingratitude of man is great, because he denies, despises, offends this life of ours within himself. And just as when one emits one's breath in order to breathe, the breath is emitted and then withdrawn so as to be able to breathe again, in the same way, in breathing over him, we give ourselves to him. And in drawing our breath back, we draw man back into ourselves. But not feeling him come into us, because his will is not with us, we feel all the weight of human ingratitude. And this is why we call you, to give you our incessant act, so that as we draw it back in order to issue it again, we may feel you come into ourselves, to receive the fulfillment of our will in the solemn act of issuing our regenerative breath, to generate the creatures. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 23, Part 4. Fiat.